Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another awesome episode of the Security Repo Podcast. Glad to have you with us this week. As always, like and subscribe. Please tell your friends about the show. It really helps us grow. It helps the channel out quite a bit in us spreading the message of security best practices out there to the greater world. We have a really awesome show this week. We have Gerard Johansen. He's a cybersecurity professional with over a decade of experience specializing in incident response, digital forensics, and threat intelligence. He's a speaker. He's also an author. He currently works on the 4th edition of Digital Forensics and Incident Response. He's currently with a MDR firm based out of Denver, Colorado. Welcome to the show, Gerard.
Thank you very much, Dwayne. Appreciate it.
Let me just start right there. Let's define that term real quick. MDR. What does MDR stand for?
Managed detection and response. So, if we thought about it, let's say a couple of years ago, it was a lot of endpoint. But when we're talking MDR, you're talking everything from endpoint, identity, all of that stuff that's sending us telemetry now. All of the data that we're getting.
All of the data.
All of the datas.
The intelligence part of it. I was just at a threat intelligence conference and really was digging into there. Like, it's not just the data. It's what you do with the data, and the context of the data is the true business of threat intelligence. So maybe we could get your take on that. What is your definition of threat intelligence?
It's really hard, and for me to have a definition, a functional definition. I think we all struggle with this. It's really data that has been analyzed and then exploitable. So if we think about, there's this massive amount of data, and I think that's the central challenge that we're going to be facing is the sheer amount of data that we can now pull. It's putting it through a process, getting it all of that into information that then can be exploited. And that means whether it's programmatically through ingestion into security tools or it's used to drive at the operational strategic level decisions by whether it's security or non-security professionals. That's really what we should really be, in my view, what we should be thinking of it in that regard.
Excellent, man. I think it's a nice level set to put a little background on this. But that's not why I brought you on the show, not to talk in depth of threat intelligence. We met back at Wild West Hackin' Fest, Mile High in Denver, 2025. It's a really long name for a conference. It was an excellent time. I had a great time, but we had a really interesting conversation around identity and access management and the threats there. And I was hoping today we could get a little bit of rehash on that, and maybe I can ask you some deeper questions on that. You've been in the enterprise space now, and the enterprise space is definitely on the forefront of this fight. I think it affects everyone. Everyone has to deal with identity. Everyone's making machine identities and onboarding users and onboarding customers and internal people. But the enterprise is doing it at scale, and you've been working with enterprises for a while, so maybe you could just give us a quick lay of the land, how you see it out there, how enterprises have been dealing with this and how they are dealing with it.
Well, I'm going to go back to that big data problem. What we have done to ourselves from a operational perspective is create much, much more data to look through. So if we look at identity and access management 10 years ago, we didn't have the amount of API, AWS STS, for example. We didn't have that amount of data to churn through. So we really have a lot more identities, plural, floating around out there in our environment. So if we take just even a decent sized enterprise that's running Active Directory for the enterprise systems, and they've got a large cloud presence, think about just all of the stuff that has to be managed by Active Directory, all of those accounts that have to be managed there. And then we've compounded this by putting a whole nother layer of control plane, container identities, app identities, workflow, all of these things together. So we're really putting a lot of data, and we're also creating some potential debate about who's going to control identities. When we were talking about Wild West Hacking Fest, this was something that we contended with a little over a decade ago in the organization I was working. Who owns identity and access management? And we've added a completely new team, parlance in DevOps, development operations, CI/CD personnel that may now they have part ownership. It was IT, it may have been desktop server and security. Now we've got a third player in this. So what I've seen is it went from a kind of use the Kunifin framework modality, kind of a complex system where we had some way to gather it, and now it's complex. There's so many moving parts that you pull on this one, you're pulling this over here. So I think the complexity and just the sheer amount of data that we have to work through as security professionals is it's just increased exponentially.
So you said an interesting term in the middle of all that, ownership. Like, who owns IAM in the enterprise? I think this is the $1 million question. I'm not asking to
Yeah,
get a firm, but just your gut opinion here on this little podcast.
uh, well, I think and I've churned even post our discussion we had. It really, I hate to say it, this is the typical digital forensic answer. It depends. It's one of those. Every organization is, I think, every enterprise is going to come at this a different way, and it really is based on where they see the risk. Is the risk greater for data with a compromised identity, whether it's human or non-human, or is the risk to they need to be first with the best? So, and also what we're actually looking at, and I think this goes to complexity as well, is if I have an identity tied to you a lambda, a lambda function, and we're churning through data every 90 days. We've got a massive amount of data. We set some app to churn through it over 3 or 4 hours, and then it goes away after the job is completed. Should security own that? I don't think so, because the risk is so minimal, and I don't want to step in front of DevOps and the data science researchers that are using these apps to be stymied. And so every organization, I think, is going to have to have a good understanding of the overall base of human and non-human, what's being run in your environment, and then they're going to have to make some hard decisions. And I think really what it boils down to is how much risk they're willing to eat on a lot of this.
That is an unfortunate answer, though, but it's the right one. It is the right one. It depends. It depends. I just wanted to say it straight up be the CISO. That's what I wanted. But no, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Well, you brought up NHIs there, and you even brought up a really good example, a Lambda function that needs to go churn data. Do you see that as the primary driver of this complexity then?
I think it's a lot of these different types of functions. When you look at, I don't know, even couldn't hazard a guess of how many specific products fall under the AWS umbrella or the Azure umbrella in terms of cloud. So a lot of that is driving this. It's a lot of the different products. It's being able to containerize applications. The Lambda functions is another one. Just even managing all of the users that need access to the control plane. This is all just making identity a huge swamp goblin in a lot of ways and trying to manage it. It's really just, and also we're still discovering new things in terms of how threat actors can use a lot of this material as well. And whether or not this type of identity, Lambda function identity or something of that nature versus, the God account, the root or the IAM account in AWS, we still have some unknowns that we haven't identified yet in terms of how identities can be used against us.
I'm just curious, is there any example of something that surprised you, like an attacker's figured out with identity recently that you've heard about?
Even just as simple as what we're seeing from penetration testing and the amount of data that can be reconned out. Just a simple sweep can be reconned out. A lot of information can be gleaned from Azure, AWS, GCP, whatever the case may be. I think that was one of the key things that I really keyed off of is this from a cloud environment perspective versus an enterprise. You had to get into the enterprise and then run some tests and run a lot of data to something like Sharpen to get a real good map of Active Directory. There's tools out there. Graph Runner, I think, is one that I've seen where it's just it's gonna go through and it's gonna give you maybe some pivotable points, and you really haven't touched the environment in the nature that a threat actor would have to in an enterprise.
That actually is a pretty good segue for the other thing I wanted to ask you about, and that is the specific topic you ran a session on back at Wild West Hackin' Fest. You talk on enterprise forensics and response, and it sounds like that's what you were just talking about. But don't put words in your mouth. Could you give us maybe a super high level, like what does it even mean?
Well, this is a block of instruction that I put together, really to kind of fit a very niche aspect of incident response. Prior to working for an MDR provider, I worked for a global incident response team. Back in the heyday of prior to COVID, where we would not parachute, but fly in and spend 3 or 4 or 5 days on site getting an organization back up and running. What I saw is there is this period of time, there's this float where we're trying to engage an IR provider, whether it's through a cyber insurer or whatever, and there's this time, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hours. And there's a lot of data and there's a lot of actions that can be taken there. So what I did is I developed really a program that hits the first 4 hours of an incident. We don't go into, it's obviously forensics is in there, but we don't go into deep malware analysis. We don't go into registry writes. We don't look at disk images or something like that. What we're doing is we're extracting key data points, and we're really trying to identify 4 things: how the threat actor got in, what they're using from a tool set perspective, how they're moving throughout the environment, and how they're using command and control. The overall intent here is to really look at, and this is where enterprise comes in, digital forensics as a decision support versus just something that exists on its own. Is you have people, network operations, cloud ops, CISO, CTO, whomever, needs to make key decisions about what to block, where to block it, and that's what we're here to support. And that's really kind of the impetus there. So we focus a lot of, kind of bringing it back to identity. One of the key points that we want to identify in that first initial pass in terms of evidence is what identities have been compromised, how are they being used, how are they being used to facilitate this attack.
That's an excellent breakdown, man. I'm glad you brought it back to identity as well. That's we're talking about. So just curious, how did that class go? How was that received? What did people walk away with?
I've been doing this for a little while. It's a well received class because I think it fills that a lot of people who are curious about forensics, what it entails. It touches a lot on that, but it also, I like to not just focus on the forensic portion of it. It's response as well. Is what does this look like from a workflow or playbook standpoint? How do you structure going from one tool to the next to get that data with a real, this is what we're looking for. For example, we process Windows event logs, and Windows event logs are key to identifying that lateral movement piece, because they really, as I like to say, there's a combination of what tool they're using, what identity they're using, what network protocols they're using. So that combination, if you can identify those 3 things, so it's the J Smith account using PS exec, and using SMB, obviously. If we can identify those 3 things, I can shut down, maybe temporarily or in the long term, that lateral movement piece, get to that containment. So I think people really appreciate this. Is not a theoretical exercise. This is a concrete, if you do this, this is the potentiality, and this is what you do with that information. This goes to your network operations, and then it may be a Windows Defender rule that has to go out to block SMB, or you may change that at GPO settings depending on your environment. but have those options. But again, focused on decision support, not just digital forensics for the sake of digital forensics.
That's awesome, man. So for people that are just hearing about this, or they've been thinking like, wow, that seems a path I want to go down, what general advice would you have for folks that want to get into this field?
Just start getting familiar with how threat actors operate. One of the challenges, a few of us out in the industry really want to focus on, hey, what are we doing digital forensics for? And it's really that objective. So reading something like the DFIR report or reading some reports of hacks gives a good sense of, okay, there's this data point. How did they find it? Well, they processed PowerShell operational logs, for example. And then you may pick apart very easy what tools are available to do that. How do I actually work through this? The good news with really, if you're interested in digital forensics and incident response, the good news is there's a lot of tools. Most of the tools are free and open source or have some sort of community license where you can download them as long as you're using them in your home lab or maybe in some testing environments. They're not going to cost you anything. And there's plenty of videos out there that'll get you started. What then kind of where I kind of see where I teach or what I look at is combining a lot of those core concepts into a good solid construct that you can walk out on a Friday, walk into your environment on a Monday and start putting those into practice.
If that sounds appealing to you out there in the audience and like this is a path you want to go down, this is definitely something that exists that you can go and help make the world more secure that way. Well, it's time to move into the final section of our show, the get to know you as a guest section. I think my favorite part, I don't know if it's everybody else's favorite part, but I always like to ask. So we got 4 questions for you, rapid fire. First, what's your favorite security command line tool?
Oh, okay. I'm gonna give it. I think Atomic Red Team is one of the best all around tools for what I in my side of the house, the blue side, really validating detections, validating where evidence happens. And one of the other things is not so much from the technical perspective, is it really forces you to get nitty and gritty with those TTPs that we see in those fancy threat intelligence reports. So it's an all around really solid tool. I love working with that.
So you've been a hiring manager throughout your career. What is your go-to interview question you always ask candidates?
I asked them to walk me through 5 to 10 minutes of their lab environment at home, and I've learned. It's kind of selfish. I've learned uh, I've learned a lot through that question. But what I see is I like it because it's something that they're comfortable with because you're in this kind of very, and I usually leave it about the last third of our conversation with that is show me your lab environment. So and then we often follow up, well, what are you working on right now? And I'm not looking for I need this person to be doing this and this. It's do they have a lab environment? Are they trying something new? Are they curious? Is this something that's critical? And everybody that I've had that question for has shown me some really interesting things. I've even had one gentleman I hired, lift up a Cisco switch, 24 port switch. I'm like, really? That's how big your lab environment is? I'm impressed. So, yeah.
Well, that definitely speaks to passion. If you can be passionate about your home lab, you're definitely going to bring that into the job with you. So,
Absolutely.
all right. And now the last 2, they're connected. What's the best security advice you think you could give anybody or that you're currently hearing out there?
I think the best advice that I can provide anybody is if you want to do this, if you're in this and you're just starting, and even if you've got, tenure, so to speak, be prepared to learn. Be prepared that there is something new, and I don't think anybody that's in the industry right now is sitting here going, there's nothing I need to learn. I mean, AI is, we're still in the first infancies of what that's going to look like for us. So be prepared to learn, have something to learn.
And finally, what is the worst advice you think currently is out there?
I think one of the key aspects that I see is I don't want to say if it's advice, but kind of a mentality of this just these 12, 14 hour, constant streams of work, 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 work. The worst advice I would ever tell anybody is to, keep working till you hit it. There's times when you need to just kind of step back real quick, take a breath, get that work life balance, and then this job will still be here. I heard that, and to sit here and go, you just need to work harder. It's like, no, sometimes you do need to step back and really kind of reevaluate, and get some O2, and really kind of think about what's going on. This is at the micro level of maybe even an incident. I've had to do that. These people that say, we just need hands on keyboard. Sometimes you need to step back, and then at the macro level, sometimes, just pounding away at it is, that kind of attitude is not going to be good in the long term.
There's always going to be more to do, no matter how
Yes.
much you get done right in the second.
The,
Security's ongoing; it's never going to end.
the bad people will be there tomorrow.
Thanks for being here, man. I really
Yeah,
appreciate
thank
you coming
you.
on and sharing your knowledge. We always leave it up at the end of the show. So anything you want to plug, any advice you want to give, just anything you want to get off your chest here to our security audience, stage is yours.
No, you know what? I'm gonna put it out to the community. Thanks for doing what you do. All right. I know what it's like. If you've got a day or 20 years, I know I've been on both ends. This is a very rewarding side of technology. There's so much to do. But at the end of the day, if you're trying to move the ball even an inch, give yourself that's a win. And as we were talking about, this is a challenge. So I salute anybody that's even thinking about going into the industry, or doing anything like that. Um, I'll be at Colonel Con. If anybody is going to Colonel Con, I'll be speaking on Formula One forensics, a little bit of a forensics topic on kind of some pit crew drills for your team. So if you're at Colonel Con, come by and say hi, and hope to see some of you there.
Awesome. Well, thank you again very much for being here, and everybody
Thank
out in the
you.
audience. Thank you again. Again, remember, like, subscribe, share with your friends, and share with everybody. Actually, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.